A pot from an old city. Pots are like these, which were used about 4,700 years ago. Right, we can see an old silver coin. These coins, such as this one, were in use from about 2,500 years ago. Archaeologists also took a closer look for bones of animals, birds, and fish to find out what people ate in the past. Plants' remains survive far more rarely. If seeds of grains or pieces of wood have been burnt, they survived in a charred form. Historians, that is, scholars who study the past, often use the word source to refer to the information found from manuscripts, inscriptions, and archaeology. Once such sources and they are found, learning about the past becomes an adventure as we reconstruct it bit by bit. So, historians and archaeologists are like detectives who use all these sources like clues to find out about our past. One past or many. Did you notice the title of this book? Our pasts. We have used the word pasts in plural to draw the attention to the fact that the past was different for different groups of people. For example, the lives of herders or farmers were different from those of kings and queens. The lives of merchants were different from those of craftspersons, and so on. Also, as it's true, even today, people followed different practices and customs in different parts of the country. Moving on further, for example, today most people living in Andaman Islands get their own food by fishing, hunting, and collecting forest produce. By contrast, most people living in cities depend on others for supplies of food. Differences such as these existed in the past as well. Besides, there is another kind of difference. We know a great deal about kings and the battles they fought because they kept records of their victories. Generally, ordinary people such as hunters, fishing folk, gatherers, farmers, or herders did not keep records of what they did. While archaeology helps us to find out about their lives, there is much that remains unknown. Moving on to the last paragraph, it tells us, what do dates mean? If somebody asks you the date, you will probably mention the day, the month, and the year, 2000 and something. These years are counted from the date generally assigned to the birth of Jesus Christ, the founder of Christianity. So, 2000 means 2000 years after the birth of Christ. All dates before the birth of Christ are counted backwards, and usually they have the letters BC, that means before Christ, added on. In this book, we will refer to the dates going back from the present using 2000 as our starting point. Letters with dates. BC, we have seen, stands for before Christ. You will sometimes find AD before dates. This stands for two Latin words, Anno Domini, meaning in the year of the Lord, that is Christ. So, 2012 can also be written as AD 2012. Sometimes CE is used instead of AD and BCE instead of BC. The letters CE stand for Common Era and BCE stand for Before Common Era. We use these terms because the Christian era is now used in most countries of the world. In India, we begin using this form of dating from about 200 years ago. And sometimes the letters BP, meaning before present, are used. Now look at the elsewhere. It is showing you a kind of picture. We have seen that inscriptions are inscribed on hard surfaces. Many of these were inscribed several hundred of years ago. All inscriptions contain both scripts and languages. Languages which were used as well as scripts have changed over time. So how do scholars understand what was inscribed? This can be done through a process known as decipherment. The further paragraph explains what is decipherment. One of the most famous stories of decipherment comes from Egypt, a country in North Africa where there were kings and queens about 5,000 years ago. Rosetta is a town on the north coast of Egypt, and here an inscribed stone was found, which contained inscriptions in 3 different languages and scripts: Greek and 2 forms of Egyptian. Scholars who could read Greek figured out that the names of kings and queens were enclosed in a little frame called a cartouche. They then placed the Greek and the Egyptian signs side by side and identified the sounds for which the Egyptian letters stood. As you can see, a lion stood for L and a bird for A. Once they used and knew what the letters stood for, they could read other inscriptions as well. In the screen in front of you, you can see keywords. The first word, traveling. Next, manuscripts, inscription, archaeology, historian, source, and decipherent. Children, you are smart enough, and we can also learn how these words are used in dictionary. So a little bit of homework is, let's find the words in dictionary too. And yes, the written part will be done in the exercise and notebooks.